Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek on Money live right now on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek on Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Heading into the three-day Memorial Day holiday weekend, the stock averages moved a bit higher today, with the NASDAQ, you guessed it, achieving a record high ahead of the three-day weekend. This coming off the worst day of the year for the blue chip stocks, worst day for the Dow since March of last year, we saw. Tech company NVIDIA, once again in the spotlight, basically the most important report of the week with its earnings news and hitting record highs. The NASDAQ and the S&P 500 each sealed a fifth straight week of gains, while the Dow did snap a 5-week winning streak today. NVIDIA surging this week following its stronger-than-expected earnings news. Inflation, the services component of the closely watched Consumer Price Index, has been sticky. We're keeping an eye on that as well. Overall, the market did finish higher today, with the Dow managing a closing gain of 4 points following that more than 600-point plunge yesterday. We're at 39,070 to wrap up this week. The S&P 500 of 37 at 53.05, and the NASDAQ up 185, good enough for a record high close at 16,921. Tech names are once again in the focus. Next week, the biggest economic report will be the reading on inflation we'll be getting for the month of April. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, which we're told is the Fed's favorite gauge for inflation. That report is coming out on May 31st next week. The stock market will be closed on Monday for Memorial Day. This Memorial Day weekend, the fleet's in at the Port of Los Angeles. It's Fleet Week in L.A. The free summer kickoff event continues. It's Southern California's largest Memorial Day event. Another important tradition continues tomorrow when the Scouts place American flags at all of the graves at the Los Angeles National Cemetery in Westwood to honor and remember the brave men and women who have served and sacrificed for the United States. The Scouts will be placing nearly 90,000 American flags at the grave sites at the L.A. National Cemetery. Coming up later this hour, I'll be joined live from the battleship USS Iowa at the Port of L.A. by Bob Kirkjian, the Chief Executive Officer and Scout Executive of Greater Los Angeles Scouting America, also a U.S. Navy reservist, Iran and Afghanistan war veteran, and former head of the Bob Hope Hollywood USO. Bob Kirkjian will be joining us live later this hour from Fleet Week. The biggest construction project in the San Gabriel Valley remains right on track. That is the Foothill Gold Line extension that will link Glendora, San Dimas, Laverne, and Pomona to the existing Gold Line system via the newly constructed light rail. We'll get an update on what's happening there, the latest milestones in the project, and what's ahead with Habib Balian, CEO of the Foothill Gold Line Extension Authority. But first, on your money, the markets and the economy and the whole works, and of course, NVIDIA too. Joining us live now, Jonathan Hoenig, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Jonathan Hoenig, thank you very much for taking the call to wrap up what turned out to be another record-shattering week with NVIDIA and the tech names here in the spotlight today.
So, thank you for having me once again, and I just want to give a quick acknowledgement and thank you to the men and women who served this country and their families for all the sacrifices they make, and they're certainly in our thoughts and as we get the weekend underway. But you're right, Frank. It was all about NVIDIA this week, and it's pretty amazing how dominant NVIDIA has become. Its GDP is bigger than most. Its market cap is bigger than most GDP of most countries. Stocks up 700% in just the last 2 years. And Frank, you're right. New all-time highs tend to beget more new all-time highs. The trend is certainly up for a lot of these semiconductor stocks. It wasn't just NVIDIA this week. Qualcomm was at a new 52-week high just this week. So we're seeing a lot of strength once again in technology. What worries me is the old adage, buy the rumor, sell the fact. I mean, these results were extraordinary. Not only that, NVIDIA announced that 10-for-1 stock split. That tends to be the time that consolidation in a stock tends to concern. I mean, the news, if you will, is out. So, I don't fight the tape, but I do think, there's probably more money than made in those names that aren't being talked about at the top of every broadcast in America. You always have to try to be a contrarian. So I wouldn't fight the tape on NVIDIA, but for example, International Paper, which is probably the opposite of NVIDIA, right? International Paper, when they grow a tree, it could take 20 years. NVIDIA has computer chips that can do calculations in tenths of seconds. So that's a name that broke out to new highs this week. So I think this is a market in which you can make money. I just don't think you want to bet the farm on NVIDIA, especially how popular it's become and how far it's come as well.
On the air live with Jonathan Honig, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund. This book is Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Certainly it's a lot more fun when things are hitting record highs like NVIDIA. And let's talk about that stock split. We haven't really touched on it that much here. So 10 for 1 stock split. So it's trading at a record high here today, nearly $27 at $1,064.69. What do we know about the stock split plans here? 10 for 1 stock split.
Well, what people should know, Frank, I believe, is that it actually really means nothing, right? I mean, there's no economic difference in having one share of $1,000 stock or 10 shares of $100 stock.
Right.
There's something a little funny, Frank. People feel better having more shares of a smaller, lower-priced item. That's why people love to buy many of these so-called meme tokens or these coins, these crypto coins that are valued at fractions of a cent. They can own hundreds of thousands of them. But a good investment is good investment. Berkshire Hathaway is probably the best example of that. Buffett never split his stock. And, the research is really mixed on that. Some of the research suggests that, stock splits encourage more retail participation, more people coming to the market. So, you won't get more money, you'll just get more shares. And ultimately, it's up to the company and the innovation as to how those shares perform.
Speaking of Berkshire Hathaway, you mentioned the stock has never split, and the Berkshire Hathaway Class A shares were up $3,580 today to $615,900. That is the most expensive stock on the New York Stock Exchange. They also have Class B shares, which are a bit less expensive. In fact, let me just pull that one up here while we're on the subject. Looks like Berkshire Hathaway Class B shares were up $1.53 today to $407.41. We're on the air live with Jonathan Honig. Certainly, the tech rally continues here with NVIDIA leading the charge. What about the other Mag 7 names, the 6 other names aside from NVIDIA, and how they performed this week?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons, Frank, I'm a little more interested in broadening out focus in terms of my investment dollars over a capitalist pig. I mean, 3 years ago, all we seemingly talked about were the electric vehicle makers, the EV makers. They were the top stories, and so many of those names, Rivian comes to example, fallen dramatically in the last couple of years. And NVIDIA and so many of those Mag 7s, they have been where the action's been for years. But Adobe, for example, is down year to date. Tesla is down year to date. Apple has come back quite a bit, but really hasn't been. It's basically been dead money year to date. So, I still hold that the real money is going to be made in some of these ideas that are a little bit further off the radar screen. Again, not as sexy as high-tech computing, but some of the shipping stocks, for example. Boat is an ETF that we've talked about. BOAT, many of those shipping stocks are off to new 52-week highs. So, as I said, I think there's places to make money in the markets, but Microsoft is, I think, the best of the best when it comes to the Mag 7. Not Apple, fine company, but when it comes to the best stocks, I think your NVIDIA and Microsoft are the strongest of the bunch.
All right, let's get to some more of the exciting stuff here now. Cryptos have had a big rally this week as well with Bitcoin flirting with its all-time high. And Ethereum had a big pop this week on that big news. Looks like we're getting closer now to Ethereum ETFs here, right? Ethereum right now hovering at just above 3,700. What are your thoughts about this latest news on Ethereum? Well,
Frank, the rule of my book, Price is Primary, more than anything, is don't fight the tape. Even if you can prove that an asset is overvalued or it supposedly shouldn't be traded like that, strength tends to beget strength. And look, I'm a fairly young person, but we've talked about it, really never understood Bitcoin and crypto. What do people do with crypto besides just simply own and speculate in crypto? So, I don't necessarily get it, but I'm not fighting the tape on that either. I don't own crypto. I'd rather own gold. A lot of people say that crypto is the digital gold, whether Bitcoin or Ether, but gold itself is hovering right up there near its all-time highs. So assets like GLD, Frank, I think make perfect sense in today's environment. Inflation, we've seen a lot of examples of as not standing down. In fact, it's heating up. OJ, copper, both at the new all-time highs just this week. So I like gold. I think crypto is a little bit more volatile and I think ultimately less attractive, but don't fight the tape. And crypto, as you said, near all-time highs. The tendency is that more all-time highs are to come.
Yep, OJ back in the news. Orange juice, that is. You're absolutely right. On the air live with Jonathan Honig. So over blockchain, you prefer gold chain. We see gold right now at around 2,335. It had popped above 2,400. Silver also appears to be along for the ride, although pulling back a bit this week, just above $30 an ounce. What about the other metal, silver in particular?
Well, that's really how money is made, Frank. I mean, you're the GOAT in the game, as they say. There's the best business reporter in the business. And as you know, you follow every little tick, every 100-point swing in the Dow, but the big moves are made over long periods of time. Gold in the early part of the 2000s was up every year from 2001 to 2010. So you had 10 years of those compounding positive returns. And I don't have a crystal ball, but that's what I expect that we really are in now, more of a grand super cycle of commodities, not a temporary inflationary spike, but a grand super cycle in which assets like gold, and it's not going to be necessarily, certainly at the beginning, as dramatic as crypto, but I think these are assets that you truly can hold for the long haul. But Frank, they're going to correct. Assets always correct, and that's why having that sound financial foundation is so important. So that it's much easier to hold an asset when it falls if you've got your credit card paid off and a few $1,000s in the bank. So I like gold. I don't think it's not going to retract. It will ultimately, but for the long term, I think this is where we're going to make much more money than anywhere else.
It was less than a week ago that the president of Iran was killed in a helicopter crash. It was a nervous start to the week with oil back in focus, which briefly moved higher but then pulled back. And right now, oil is below $78 a barrel here. Obviously, a lot of nervousness and attention focus on what's happening in the Middle East powder keg at the moment. But what do you see ahead for oil here?
Well, the rising tide is likely to lift all boats with commodities overall. But when it comes to oil stocks, I think these are the bigger, the better. XLE is one that we've talked about a few times before, Frank. We think of oil companies as these evil bastards, polluting the environment and screwing us all. It's just the opposite is the case. These are the companies that literally power our economy in every way. So I like oil, but interestingly, Frank, the strongest energy stocks now are actually solar stocks. They've come back from the dead a little bit. They had been dead money for quite some time, but TAN, that's TAN, that's the ETF that tracks those solar stocks. It's still down year to date, but just in the last month, the ETF is up almost 20%, and not even too far from where it was a couple of months ago. So TAN would be my best bet in energy right now. I don't own it at capitalspig.com, but I think you'll make some money in solar in the days to come.
All right. I think you had mentioned China last time we spoke, too. Since then, we just had the China-California Business Forum celebrating the big business connections, the enormous connections between here in China, L.A. and Shanghai, for example, and with the ports, of course, very, very active. So much Chinese goods coming in and out, goods flowing in both directions from the ports of L.A. and Shanghai in particular. And then, of course, a lot of nervousness about what's happening with the military moves around Taiwan this weekend. What are your thoughts about China at this point?
Well, the more totalitarian they've gotten, Frank, the less free they've gotten, the worse the economy has gotten. I have a lot of empathy for the people of China. I've never been, but the Chinese people I've met are extraordinarily hardworking, interesting, innovative, creative. Their stock market, best index I know is SXI. That's the ETF that tracks the large cap Chinese stocks. In the last 5 years, it's down by about 31%, and a lot of that really came during COVID and after COVID. I mean, again, massively authoritarian lockdown and crackdown. But I do think the table has turned, and FXI even in the last month is almost up about 10%. And along with commodities, Frank, I do think emerging markets are the place to be. EEM is the big ETF that tracks emerging markets. It recently ticked a new high. A lot of these emerging market stocks are at new highs, and China actually dominates a lot of those emerging markets. The one thing that could throw it all off would be tariffs. And Donald Trump has promised a dramatic escalation in tariffs, particularly against China. There was one study out by the Peterson Institute that suggested that these could cost the average American $1,700. So not a fan of that politically, and I'm actually glad to see that Chinese stocks are doing well, even with that news. So you want to diversify into emerging markets right now, I think. Don't make it your only bet, but some assets in emerging markets and even China, I think, are going to do well in the months to come.
All right, along with everything else we just talked about around the water cooler or whatever people talk around nowadays, meme stocks are back getting attention. We had that brief pop of those couple big names, GameStop and AMC Entertainment. Any thoughts about what's happening with those?
Yeah, it's been bizarre to me, Frank, that people look at a meme stock and they think somehow that buying shares in a speculative penny stock, in effect, is some kind of a political statement. Even RFK Jr. got into the game this week. The candidate for president tweeted that he bought shares in GameStop in a sense to stand on the side of solidarity with small investors. I think it's pretty backward. I mean, small investors become larger investors not by playing these kind of speculative names, but by investing in serious companies over long periods of time. And I think GameStop, Frank, just as a difference. I mean, on May 15th, it was trading at over $60 a share, and now it's trading at $19 a share. And so most legitimate companies don't lose half their value in less than a week's time. And I think those are the exactly types of names that, if you're really interested in making money, you should stay away from. Better to go to Vegas for the week, or pick some ponies at the track, and don't use your 401k as a gambling device.
Terrific. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for taking the call, and thanks for your thorough analysis and kind words as always. That is Jonathan Hoenig, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, author of the book Price is Primary: How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. That book's right on target these days. Jonathan, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon. We wish you a restful holiday weekend.
Thank you, Frank. Be well.
Thank you very much, and let's get right out to the freeways now on 790 KABC. Friends, let's be honest, sometimes we find ourselves or a loved one dealing with a massive injury caused by a terrible accident by no fault of our own. Sometimes it's simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We're good at preparing for earthquakes and fires, but let's not forget to prepare in case we're involved in a major accident. It's critical to know who to call first. Clark Fielding became an attorney to help you in a crisis. Fielding Law is focused on justice and resources for you because they understand how the system works and what to do in the most horrific situations. I always say to put the Fielding Law team in your phone under the word accident, so all you have to do is hit that dial button. Believe me, you'll feel better having set this up for yourself and your family. The number is 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. With the population exploding and increased vehicles on the freeways, be proactive. Prepare for the worst and expect the best. But if and when you do need help, call Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Again, clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek on Money continues here, 790 KABC, ahead of the three-day holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend 2024. The stock market edging higher to cap off the week. The Dow up 4 points at 39,070, coming off the worst one-day drop we've seen this year. The drop of more than 600 points we saw for the Dow yesterday, the worst day we've seen actually in more than a year. The S&P 500 closing up 37 today at 5305. The NASDAQ, the star of the day, up 185 points, settling at a record high at 16,921. The yield in the 10-year note now at 4.47%. NVIDIA, the star of this week, hitting record highs at the close today at nearly $27 at $1,064.69. The company this week also announced a 10-for-1 stock split. Intel, the tech bellwether, in the past anyway, up 64 cents at $30.72. Price of gold pulling back $2 at $2,335.20 an ounce. Silver up 8 cents at $30.54 an ounce. Checking the cryptos now, Ethereum taking the spotlight this week on a big pop. And the news this week on the Ethereum news that looks like we're getting closer to an Ethereum ETF at some point. And Ethereum down about $50 now at $3,730 and change. Bitcoin down $454. Let's see if we can bring up the latest here on Bitcoin, bouncing around here as it always does. Ethereum right now down 46.50 at 37.33, and right now Bitcoin is been hovering around 70,000. So right now it's up 700 now at 68,664. Bitcoin doing what it does, very volatile lately, and of course getting close to its record high again this week. Doge at 16 cents. And now the latest news here on 790 KABC. The fleet's in at the Port of Los Angeles this Memorial Day holiday weekend. It's Fleet Week in Los Angeles, so the free summer kickoff event continues with the support of many businesses here in Southern California. It's the LA area's largest Memorial Day event. Another important tradition continues tomorrow when the Scouts place American flags at all of the graves at the Los Angeles National Cemetery in Westwood to honor and remember the brave men and women who've served and sacrificed for the United States. The Scouts will be placing nearly 90,000 American flags at the grave sites. Joining us live now from the battleship USS Iowa at the Port of Los Angeles is Bob Kirkjian, the Chief Executive Officer and Scout Executive of Greater Los Angeles Scouting America, also a U.S. Navy reservist, Iran and Afghanistan war veteran, former head of the Bob Hope Hollywood USO. Bob Kirkjian, thank you very much, Commander, for taking the call here this afternoon.
Frank, always a pleasure to be with you, and a happy Fleet Week to all, and a very grateful Memorial Day, especially to those who have suffered a loss in the past with a veteran.
Certainly, we honor the sacrifices made, and with tremendous gratitude. Bob Kirkjian, you're right there in the heart of the Fleet Week activities there. Tell us what's happening there, first of all.
Well, Fleet Week, as you say, is the official kickoff to summer here in L.A., Frank, and the organizers are expecting over 100,000 citizens and residents and visitors to come through the footprint here in front of the USS Iowa down in San Pedro in the Port of Los Angeles, as well as have thousands and thousands visit the USS Carl Vinson, which is an aircraft carrier currently out at berth 46 at the very top of the channel. It is a spectacular ship, and I encourage all your listeners to make it down here and join in the festivities if they can.
That is very big, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier right there, and people are able to go aboard and visit, right?
That is correct. The lines are long, so I encourage folks to get here early, but you can walk the entire carrier, and this year they're actually doing tours inside some of the meal spaces and the berthing spaces, so you really get a feel for what it's like to be a United States Navy sailor or Marine underway aboard the Carl Vinson.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like the biggest event ever there. Been privileged to have been there with you for many years in the past, and it's always a spectacular occasion, and certainly very, very meaningful, and such a powerful impact to see these magnificent vessels, and most importantly, meeting people like you and all of our great Navy personnel there on the scene.
Yeah, it's so true, and thank you, Frank. And I know that personally and professionally, I've always appreciated your support, both as a member of the Navy as well as the USO and now Scouting.
That's right. So let's talk about that important role that you've now taken. You did a great job there as the head of the Bob Hope Hollywood USO, and now heading up scouting here in Southern California. And it's very dramatic and very touching and momentous to see the Scouts place American flags at all of the graves at the Los Angeles National Cemetery in Westwood. That'll be happening again this weekend. Tell us about that.
Well, Frank, certainly two of the points of the Scout Law is a Scout is loyal, and they're loyal to their country, and a Scout is reverent, and they're reverent to those who've gone before them, particularly those who've lost their life in the service to our country. So literally hundreds, if not thousands of Scouts over the course of the weekend will be placing flags, not just at the National Cemetery in Los Angeles, but on veterans' graves at cemeteries around the county and around the world. And even our overseas Scouts will be placing flags at the graves of veterans in the cemeteries in Europe and the Pacific.
And in the case of the L.A. National Cemetery, where we will see that dramatic image again this weekend, I'm sure, and of course a formal ceremony on Memorial Day on Monday, we're talking about nearly 90,000 grave sites there.
That's true. It is an enormous cemetery, and as I said, it takes hundreds, if not thousands, of scouts and adult volunteers who are really the heart and soul of scouting to carefully and with reverence place a flag at every single grave site at that cemetery.
You've taken on this important role at a time of change. I know the Boy Scouts has recently changed their name, right, which will officially go into effect next year. Tell us what's happening with Scouting now and how businesses can support all of your efforts.
Yeah, that's correct, Frank, and thank you for asking. Yeah, so starting next February, we are officially Scouting America. We've taken on the moniker currently in L.A., where we are Greater L.A. Scouting, a part of Scouting America. And really, it is simply that. It is just a name change. Girls have been part of Scouting officially since 2019. So we're heading towards 5-6 years worth of girls in Scouting. We have troops with girls and troops with boys. There's a pilot program that's going to happen to do a co-ed troop structure. It is completely optional. And if you're a parent and you want your young son in a troop or a pack that only has boys, we have that for you. If you want your young daughter in a troop or a Cub Scout pack that only has girls, we have that for you. And maybe at some point in the future, we'll have a co-ed option as well. But it's really meant to emphasize that scouting's for everyone. We welcome everyone. It doesn't matter where you're from, what language you speak, what color your skin is, how you identify. We think the values and character building and leadership opportunities in scouting are second to none. And I will tell you, I think that there's nothing our nation needs more right now than leaders of character and leaders who identify with the Scout Oath and the Scout Law.
Well, I'm with you all the way. As a former Scout myself, it was a tremendous experience and look upon it very, very fondly. It was a fantastic experience. And for business people that want to support Scouting and for that matter, what's happening there at Fleet Week, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, we're at greaterlascouting.org, and if there are parents out there who are interested in enrolling their son or daughter in Scouting, it's beascout.org. It is really the premier youth development and leadership development program in the United States. It has been for many years, and we are proud to continue that. Out here at Fleet Week, it's lafleetweek.org. That has all of the schedules, the visiting ship information, and there is a huge footprint in front of the USS Iowa with all kinds of stacked display items. There's tanks, there's attack helicopters, there are vehicles, great for young and old. Encourage everyone to come down and see us here at LA Fleet Week.
That's fantastic. I see Rick Caruso posted something on social media. He hosted some of the sailors at the Grove, I see. For anyone, any businesses that would like to roll out the red carpet for the sailors in town, is there a way to go about doing that?
Absolutely. Maybe a little too late this year, but I think anytime you see a sailor, just in general, make sure you ask them about their ship, the USS Carl Vinson. Make sure you ask them about their experience. I like to say when I talk to sailors here that there are probably more people in LA that know someone who has played a member of the military on TV or in a movie than there are people who actually know a member of the military. So get out there, meet the people of LA, and make them proud of their United States Navy and Marine Corps team.
Well, you are an angel in the City of Angels, and we salute you for your service to the U.S. Navy, to the nation, as well as to the USO there, and now taking on the important role as Chief Executive Officer and Scout Executive of Greater Los Angeles Scouting America. You have our full support. Bob Kirchen, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and please convey our gratitude to all of the sailors aboard the aircraft carrier and everyone there at Fleet Week. And now we go out to the freeways here on 790 KABC. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Record-shattering week for the stock market. The NASDAQ ending at a record high here today. The biggest construction project in the San Gabriel Valley remains right on track. That is the Foothill Gold Line extension that will link Glendora, San Dimas, Laverne, and Pomona to the existing Gold Line by a newly constructed light rail system. Let's get an update now on the latest milestone of the project and what's ahead with Habib Balian, the CEO of the Foothill Gold Line Extension Authority. Habib, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, and thanks for highlighting this important project in the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah, I remember the days when the late, great economist Jack Kaiser laid it out for us back when this all started. This is going to have a tremendous and is having a tremendous economic impact on the entire region. Give us an update on what's happening there.
Sure. We're completing the $1.6 billion extension of the project from Glendora to Pomona. It's just over 9 miles long with 4 stations in each of the cities in San Dimas and Laverne, Glendora, and Pomona. This will have a huge impact locally to each of their downtowns with a lot of development coming. So much population and jobs will be coming to the San Gabriel Valley over the next 2 decades. A lot of it is going to be focused in the Foothill Gold Line extension area, and this will be a way for cities to accommodate not only people's residences that they are obligated to by state law to increase the housing stock, but also will ease traffic and give folks an alternative to getting on the freeway and getting into their single occupancy vehicle. So we're very excited about this project and what it's going to do for all of these cities.
Well, that's great, and appreciate you coming to the line for an update on this important project. And it's been happening now, the construction, about 15 years now? How has the line affected the economy already, and also how it's affected businesses all along the way and housing and so forth?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen, so much more development has occurred along the first phase. Initially, you've been around, you've seen this project over the years, but from Union Station downtown all the way through Los Angeles, through Chinatown, South Pasadena and Pasadena, and now onto the extension through all of these cities, you'll see the development going on. As recently as in Monrovia, you can see all the housing stock that's now available connecting their downtowns to the Gold Line. So it is very important. It's critical to, the thousands of jobs and, over $2 billion worth of economic output that's going to be part of this project. So the cities are going to be able to benefit from this, but also folks just wanting to get around the county have an alternative that they've never had before.
Right, such an important transit route for folks from downtown all the way out to the San Gabriel Valley. And what's the current plan on the drawing board? Will you be able to expand even further?
Well, our project now gets us to Pomona. The plan will then go to Claremont and Montclair. We're seeking additional state funds. They are currently in the draft of the budget that we see that's circulated. So we're going to get an additional $798 million from the state. That will allow us to complete the project to Montclair. Again, that's a huge transit hub in Montclair with their transit center that will connect to the Gold Line and bring Claremont and Montclair even closer to the San Gabriel Valley. So with that funding that will be, hopefully we'll get notified of in through the state's budget this fiscal year, we'll start construction, and that project will be done in about 5 years from now. We've started that procurement. It's $1 billion project. And we're very excited of also including Claremont and Montclair into the entire system that's going to run all the way through to downtown.
That's great. Any estimate of how many cars have been taken off the road with people using this important rail line?
Well, we think that currently we know that ridership is back up to where it was. There's close to 20,000 riders a day through the system. So we see that number continue to grow and go up as the system gets extended.
Excellent. And what is the next milestone for the project, and what's the timetable on this?
So we're right now about 7 months from turning the project over to Metro. They will then start the testing phase for their operation, which will be sometime next year. So when we turn the project over to Metro January 3rd of 2025, the project will be completed. The stations will be done, landscaping will be in, all the artwork will be installed, signage will be installed, and the system, as I say, will be ready for Metro to do their testing. So then they will pick up the ball at that point in January, and then they will put the testing underway and put the system into revenue operations sometime next year. So it'll be a big year for Metro putting this in online, and of course it'll be very important to us next year because we'll award the contract for the next phase of the project that gets us from Pomona to Claremont and then Montclair, where it will terminate.
This is such a big project, doesn't get that much attention. I know the folks at the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership are very enthusiastic about all this. And, of course, you have the majestic milestone ceremonies. But I don't know if you've heard thank you enough for overseeing this enormous project there and your management of it. It's been running on time and on budget, right?
That's right. This will be our third phase where we're keeping our fingers crossed. We'll also be on time and on budget. We have a great team. We've got great cooperation with the cities, each of the cities that we go through, but also the community. The community is very excited about this project. They know it will do a lot to alleviate traffic, but also help development, and again, help with the cities and their long-term plans for bringing folks into the San Gabriel Valley and making sure that they have not only a place to go for leisure, but also a place to live and a place to work. So I think that's what's so great about these transit projects. It brings all those elements together, and I think makes for a better society and certainly better for cities planning.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for that important update. That is Habib Balian, the CEO of the Foothill Gold Line Extension Authority, coming to us from the San Gabriel Valley. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much, and let's recap what happened with the stock market this week, with the NASDAQ ending the week at a record high, up 185 points, settling at 16,921. The Dow managed a closing gain of 4 points following yesterday's more than 600-point tumble. That was the worst day we've seen so far this year, with the Dow pulling back some more from its recent record high. Last week it was above 40K for the first time. Right now it's at 39,070. The S&P 500 moved up 37 points to settle at 53.05, and the yield in the 10-year note now is at 4.47%. Gold has been kissing record highs lately, pulling back a couple of dollars to $2,335.20 an ounce. Silver at $30.54 an ounce. Bitcoin bouncing around the 68,600 or so here at the moment. Ethereum making news this week with that big pop right now at around 3,700, and Doge at 16 cents. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 on Tuesday following the 3-day holiday weekend. This is Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
How wrestling really works and how you get the ratings. Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson explain on 83 Weeks.
This is indeed the first WrestleMania without Vince McMahon.
I mean, it's about as horrible as it can get, but does erasing that history make it any better?
Everybody's being careful not to celebrate Vince McMahon. I think you can acknowledge him without celebrating him. I think that's the double-edged sword that everybody's sort of carrying for now.
83 Weeks on YouTube or wherever you listen.